everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sangamo Road Trip. This week I had the great pleasure of traveling to Pawnee, Illinois, just right outside of Chatham and Auburn, Illinois. It's a little farther south, and it's a small, nice town where you can travel around the square and get to know the businesses and people that make up the town of Pawnee. Pawnee has an interesting history, dating back to 1818, when the first settlers arrived. It received its name in 1854 from a Springfield postmaster rather than a tribe of Indians as generally believed. Pawnee was incorporated in 1891, but in 1888, prior to incorporation, the town's farmers and businessmen were far-sighted in building their own railroad. It was named the Pawnee Railroad. Although originally conceived to transport farm products and livestock, the discovery of large deposits of coal in the area greatly enhanced its importance. In the early 1900s, Pawnee also had its own mine. The Peabody Coal Company Mine No. 5, originally the Horse Creek Coal Company, it became one of the famous Peabody Midland Tract mines. In the boom years of the 1940s and 1950s, Pawnee boasted its own 2 grain elevators, 6 grocery stores, a movie theater, 3 taverns, 2 restaurants, a post office, a dry goods store, a hardware store, a lumber yard, a drugstore, a feed store, 2 garages, 2 auto dealerships, 2 implement dealerships, a service station, a newspaper office, a bank, a township office, doctor's office, dentist, harness cobbler shop, a pool room, and 3 barber shops, all located on the square. Then, like most small communities in the area, the reduction of employment at the mines, coupled with improved roads and automobiles, contributed to its business decline. Other factors were the advent of television and the inception of larger cities with supermarkets. The people who first came and settled in the area were not men and women of wealth, but they were individuals who desired to settle the prairie and carve a living from the wilderness. They expected to endure hardships and encounter the hardships of the frontier. Money was scarce and little used. Hunting and agriculture were the only vocations that promised a livelihood. There were no railways, telegraphs, or newspapers, no cultivators, no machinery for harvesting, no mills, and no factories. For social life, neighbors helped one another as much as possible and enjoyed each other's company. They sought occasions in a thrifty way to combine pleasure with practical benefit. The Lockridge brothers, William and John Lockridge, took advantage of the growing community by building the first grain elevator and bank in Pawnee. According to the Springfield Daily Journal, quote, "The gentlemen are bankers and have one of the neatest buildings in the country. They have been in this business about a year and are receiving the entire patronage of the county. They have capital stock of $25,000 and do a general banking business. They also handle grain and have large agricultural interests. They pay considerable attention to the livestock business and have quite a quantity of stock on hand at all time. They are natives of Sangamo County and have an extensive acquaintance with the people. They number their friends by the hundreds in all parts of the county." Unquote. The Lockridges became farmers, stock raisers, and now merchants and bankers. Around the same time the village of Pawnee became incorporated, the Lockridge brothers were powerful individuals in the Sugar Creek, Pawnee community. William and John were two of the 37 individuals that signed a petition to incorporate Pawnee as a village. In order to sign the petition, they had to, quote, "respectfully represent that they are legal voters residing within the said county of Sangamo, in an area not exceeding 2 square miles, and which has resident therein population of over 300 inhabitants, and which is not included within the limits of any incorporated town." These were the requirements of incorporating the village of Pawnee. William and John were just two of the many citizens who bought stock in the Pawnee Railroad as well and pushed for the track to be expanded. The Springfield Journal stated in March 21 of 1891, quote, "Building of this road is due the wonderfully rapid growth made by the town, and the citizens are giving it its hearty support. This is the only road in the United States that was built by a company of farmers, and when completed was entirely free from debt." Unquote. This allowed the farmers of different towns surrounding Pawnee, such as Chatham, Auburn, and others who were an agricultural center, to transport their goods to Springfield and to other cities. With the growth of Pawnee and the construction of the Pawnee Railroad, the Lockridge brothers decided to expand their farming business and open a grain elevator and grocery store. The brothers were doing pretty well for themselves and their families, and the booming town was expanding their business. To the late Everett Grundy, who worked for the Pawnee Herald, stated this of the brothers and their business. Quote, "The first grain elevator in Pawnee was built by two brothers, J.R. and W.R. Lockridge, and was located on the southwest corner of 6th and Lincoln Streets, on the south side of the square in 1885. The scales were on the south side of Lincoln Street, directly across from the building on the southwest corner of the square." Unquote. This helped the Lockridge brothers contain their business and allowed them to ship out any type of stock that they needed, and also allowed the railroad to bring in whatever goods that they needed to stock in their store. While farmers, the Lockridge brothers opened the grocery store in the 1880s to sell their produce and other goods needed. According to an article in the Pawnee Herald Centennial Edition from 1954, J.F. Smith's grocery store was a, quote, "one-room, two-story building facing the south." Smith was the original owner of the building and transferred it to the Lockridge brothers. Later, the brothers laid out the Pawnee Square, and eventually all businesses located there. This was a big step for the Lockridge family. Starting out as a family of farmers, the family took the next big step in creating a new type of family business. They switched from becoming farmers to bankers. According to oral histories and the Pawnee Herald, the Lockridge brothers opened the bank because farmers would ask them to hold money for them at their grocery store. Since it was quite a distance to the bank in Springfield by horse and buggy, many of the local farmers would leave money with the Lockridges to place in a safe in their store. The brothers would deposit the farmers' money when they made a trip to the Springfield Bank, or the farmers would leave it at the store as sort of a drawing account so they could get money when they needed it. These actions prompted the Lockridge brothers to think about starting a bank in Pawnee. When they opened the bank in 1890 on the corner of 4th and Washington, the brothers owned most of the land and businesses in downtown Pawnee. The Brothers Bank was a completion of the downtown Pawnee Square. The bank was made of brick and stands 3 floors tall. And the bank still stands today and remains to be the earliest building built in the square. It even survived a fire that took place in 1901. But sadly, due to the market crash of 1893 and 1896, the brothers filed for bankruptcy and lost the bank and the grocery business. If you're interested in the Lockridge brothers' story, in the Illinois Regional Archives Depository here at UIS, you are able to see 5 folders of their bankruptcy case file. These are rich histories that you can dive into and discover more about businesses who sadly lost their business during different crashes in our nation's history. The Horse Creek Settlement was founded in 1854 and was an agricultural center. Local farmers and businessmen were starting to think of a railroad as means of transporting their products to and from Springfield, Illinois, and from there to other market outlets. Prior to 1888, the railroad running north and south was built several miles to the west of Pawnee. The railroad was called the St. Louis and Chicago Railroad. In the year of 1888, Pawnee farmers and businessmen talked and planned a large railroad of their own. But with limited funds, they decided to build a railroad from Pawnee and link it with the St. Louis and Chicago Railroad. The only other possibility would be to go over 17 miles to the east and connect with the Springfield and Pawnee Railroad. Built in 1870, this railroad was the forerunner of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The eastward route would have been expensive, and several trestles would be needed to bridge the streams. On or about September 25, 1888, the Pawnee Railroad received its charter to build, and work was started on the right of way between Pawnee and the junction with the St. Louis and Chicago Railroad. This junction came to be known as the Pawnee Junction. The first timetable for the Pawnee Railroad was issued for use on Sunday, July 28, 1889. It traveled all the way to Springfield via the Pawnee Junction and Glenarm, Illinois. Its first official run was on Sunday, August 8, 1889, to Glenarm. In 1891, work was begun on the next leg of the Pawnee Railroad, from the Pawnee Junction west to Auburn, Illinois, along with a 160-foot trestle over Sugar Creek, about 6 miles east of Auburn. Waverly Street in Auburn was the point of connection between the Pawnee Railroad and the Chicago and Alton Railroad, which ran north and south through Auburn. By 1903, the Illinois Midland Coal Company bought into the Pawnee Railroad and put up monies to make much-needed improvements to the railroad and the equipment. In 1904, the Illinois Midland Coal Company forced the Pawnee Railroad into bankruptcy. The name was changed to the Chicago and Illinois Midland Railroad on January 25, 1906. This railroad expanded east to Taylorville, Illinois, during 1906 and still in use today. Beginning in the early 1900s, Peabody Coal Company invested heavily in coal mines in Sangamon and Christian counties. Peabody identified their mines by numbers. This series of 5 coal mines and mining towns became known as the Midland Tract. Peabody purchased the Pawnee mine from the Victor Fuel Company, later the Victor Coal Company. The mine was initially known as Horse Creek Coal Company. At first, these mines were all hand-loading operations, requiring the employment of approximately 3,800 men to operate. By the late 1920s, Peabody Coal Company began introducing machines to gain efficiency and remain competitive. These machines rightfully represented the enemy to the miners, mostly Italian, Irish, British, Slovak, Russian, and Lithuanian immigrants, or sons of immigrants, as the machines would eventually replace over half of them. These ethnic groups lived in Peabody Coal Company-owned houses in the various mining communities. In Pawnee, these houses were mainly located at the west entrance of town, between Washington Street and Route 104, or known as Carroll Street. This area of small, square, one-story houses was known as the Patch. Pawnee's mine, Peabody Coal Company, Mine No. 5, was located on the south side of Route 104 near the curve on the west side of town. It closed in 1925. Most Pawnee miners then transferred to Peabody Mine No. 8, located at Tovey, Illinois. In 1932, many miners decided to strike against Peabody Coal Company, withdraw from the United Mine Workers Union, and establish their own union, the Progressive Miners of America. This action initiated one of the most violent union movements in modern history. Many mines were closed for several years, as the union rivalry continued, with the UMW controlling some mines and the PAMA controlling others. By the mid-1930s, Peabody had most of its mines operational and under the control of the UMW. The PMA lost most of its members along the way, and by 1939, it was finished as a union. Peabody Mine No. 8 was eventually replaced by Peabody Mine No. 10, which was located about 3 miles east of Pawnee. Many Pawnee miners then transferred to the new mine. At that time, No. 10 was declared the largest coal mine in the world. It closed in 1994 and signaled the end of the Peabody era. To discover more about the history of Pawnee, feel free to visit the Sangamo Valley Collection at the Lincoln Library in Springfield, Illinois. You can also look in the collections over at the Sangamo Link, where the Sangamon County Historical Society writes articles about local history here in Sangamon County. Tune in next time when we discover the rich history of Rochester, Illinois. Hope to see you this Friday where we discover more about the Sangamon County area here on the Sangamo Road Trip.